We are Danny and Laura Boyd, and our beautiful brokenness is an expression of what we are learning as we have journeyed with God through 31 years of marriage and raising 11 children. In our journey, we have encountered God's love and faithfulness as He rescued us both from death and addiction. We have seen His mercy and grace as we tried to earn His love, only to discover He freely loves us because we are His beloved children. We invite you to walk with us as we openly discuss the ups and downs we have faced and how we are more alive and in love with Him than ever before. We're continuing on with our romance story and how God brought us together 31 plus years ago. And when we ended on our previous podcast, and number 3, we kind of led up to the point where we had our first date. And so if you didn't get to hear that, then go back and listen to how God kind of had worked in both of us and then led us up to having what was loosely called the first date. But after we spent that first night together, we had come back and talked all through the night at Laura's sister's apartment, and it was just amazing how, even though in our immaturity and our, I would say, like infancy, like just being so young age-wise and really being very young in a maturity-wise, we were connecting, and it was just different things that we were saying to one another, and like, wow, okay, like really feeling seen and heard in a way that I don't think that either one of us had before.
Yeah, I had spent all my teenage years trying to stay away from relationships with guys. Just wanting to hurt them and use them. And Danny slipped under there and was so real and was saying all the things that my heart knew about me, but I'd never revealed to anybody. And it was just so quick. I didn't have time to get my walls up. And I just knew that he was different. He was different. And he loved God. And he apparently liked me a lot. So that was very exciting.
Looking back and thinking about some of the ways that we connected that first time, looking back now, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so like, oh, we talked about not wanting to have kids for a long time, which is really funny. Yeah. We talked about wanting to travel, which didn't happen until way later in life. We talked about there were things that we didn't want to do. That are like not cooking, Laura not cooking, me not doing yard work, and different things. We're like, really? But yet again, there was something underlying there that we were just in God's grace, really seeing one another, really knowing one another. And so from that, again, I mentioned last time, I went back home, and we, prior to internet, prior to, the really email and all these different other social media ways to connect, we talked on the phone, long distance, which cost money. And then I mailed her some letters, and then that led up to a second date. And so I came down the next weekend, and we went out to dinner on Friday. And then on Saturday, we went back to the Texas State Fair, which was like a risk, I guess. But we went back to the Texas State Fair. And while we were at the Texas State Fair, we took a picture. They had one of those booths where you take a picture together. And so we took a picture together. And when we were leaving, I had one of the pictures on like a keychain type thing, and I decided to hang the keychain on my mirror in my car. And so I put that up, and we're driving away from the Texas State Fair and looking at this picture.
And I'm looking at the picture, and I'm just not even thinking. I just know in my soul we're going to be together forever, but not consciously. And so I said, our kids are going to think that's such a cute picture.
And
didn't even think about what that meant.
And I heard that. I'm like, what did she just say? And the most clever thing that I could think of in the moment was, well, we need to do something before that happens. and I'm thinking marriage. We need to get married before we have kids, because it dawned on me what, like, the connection of what she was saying, and I'm like, oh my goodness, did she just? Wow, that's and it wasn't a wow. I can't believe she would say that in a negative way. I'm like, oh my goodness, that I feel the same way. Like I'm there with you, but I'm like, I'm too scared to say much else, anything else.
I need you to remember this is a week after our first semi-date, so this is.
Yeah, 1 week, and so we drive away, and that's like in my mind, the rest of the evening. So then we go out to dinner again. That was that night, and I don't remember exactly how it played out or came out. I wish I did exactly, but all I know is at some point that evening, I was like, this is what was said earlier, and will you marry me? So I asked her to marry me that night, and I'm like, this is what knowing this is how you feel and knowing how I feel, I want this to be real. This, I'm like really committed to this, and after 1 week.
Where we weren't even in the same town.
And so she said yes. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then the next day, so again, this is all, 7-8 days. So the next day on Sunday, we go to worship together. And after we went to church, I'm like, I want to go buy your ring. And so we went to a jewelry store, and I bought a ring on credit.
Yeah.
And not a very, very expensive ring, very nice ring on credit, and gave it to her. And I'm like, I want everybody to know this is the real deal. I want everybody to know that we're not, we're not playing around.
I think he was kind of thinking if it was a pretty big rock, people would think that we were serious.
Yeah, maybe so. But again, we're 22 and 20, which, age, I'm not caught up in age. I know some very mature 22 and 20-year-olds. We were not those people. we were not mature, super mature.
But we needed family.
Yeah.
And that's what God saw.
Yeah, God
saw
knew that.
Two people who were baby Christians who were, I was living alone. I was very, didn't know about unconditional love. And he brought me Danny.
Mm. So we get engaged after a week, and we set a date to get married in June of the next year. Mm-hmm. So we kind of decided that.
Yeah, this is October, middle of October.
This is October of 1988, and we set for June of the next year when we would get married. And I'm at the time living in Oklahoma City, and she's living in Fort Worth, and I'm going home, working a full-time job in Oklahoma City, and then would on the weekends, as soon as I could get out of work on Friday, I would fire down, to Texas. We would spend the weekends together, and then at some point, sometimes late Sunday night or early Monday morning, I would drive back in, and there were some Monday mornings when I didn't make it back in. And we did that for, I don't remember how long, 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, I did come up one weekend and met his family.
Okay, yeah. Which we hadn't, we hadn't met families or anything prior to that. Just in hindsight, it's like, that's crazy, but that's, that's how God worked at the time. So I was driving back and forth, and 3, 4, 5, sometime not too long later, it's like we can't keep going on like this, or at least I don't feel like I can continue to go on like this. This is hard. I want to be together all the time. I don't want this separation. And again, I'm not saying that's a great excuse. It's not. But just where I was in my immaturity and different things, I'm like, can we move the date up? Can we get married sooner? And we're committed to this. We know this is what we want. We know this is what God wants. Let's go, quicker. And I remember telling her that the very first time, and the way that she initially responded, I thought, we're done.
I did not want to get married earlier because I knew. Now, I loved him, and I know I'd spend my life with him. But I had been taught by my dad that when you get married, your life is over. That's what he told me. And my mom modeled submission, but as a martyr. So I'm like, when we get married, I lose all my freedom. So let's just have fun, on the weekends, and during the week, I get to do what I want to do. So, because I had friends, and we, my sister, we did things, and so, but I knew that once we got married, that he would be my first commitment, and he would be my first priority. And I was willing to do that, but I wasn't really wanting to do it in 2 months.
Yeah.
But as we finished talking, and he just was sharing his heart, I thought, I can give up my rights and love him well. And that's what I did.
Thankfully.
I said yes.
Thankfully. So we decided to move the date up to December 31st of 1988, which again, so timeline wise, that's about 2.5 months or 2 months after, first date, engagement, and so within 2.5 months for sure. And we're talking, we just met for the very first time at our birthday party, August the 6th. So 4.5 months later, from the very first time that we met one another, here we are getting married on December 31st, 1988. And it's just, we got married in Oklahoma City, and I just think we had all these different people that came together to make it happen. We played very little part in it other than showing up and getting married.
Yeah.
I mean, our families dove in, especially my mom and my stepmom and their family really jumped in and kind of made it happen and made it a really special day.
Yeah, because I grew up in poverty. Plus, I never thought I would have a relationship, so I'd never thought about a wedding. I had never dreamed about having a wedding. And so when we're like, we're getting married, I was thinking, I'll get a dress, we'll show up, we'll get married. But Danny's stepmom and family and his mom, they were very gracious, and they're like, we'll do a wedding for you. So literally, I showed up with a dress. They did everything else. It was such a gift. It was wonderful.
Yeah. It's just, just so many things that God orchestrated that we didn't have anything to do with to make it happen. And just, it's amazing how you don't think that God's working in your life. You don't think maybe that God is doing anything, but yet if you take the time to look back, you can see there are all these different things that God was working. All things. It says that God works all things together for good for those that love Him and who are called according to His purpose. And He loves us all, and He's called us all. But that's going after Him. There's a partnership there. But I just think God was so beautifully putting all these things together to bring us together.
So one of the things that we told ourselves we would never mention divorce. I come from a divorced home. I think everyone in my family, my mom's side and my dad's side, were divorced. Aunts, uncles, grandparents. Now my mom's parents weren't, but they were miserable. Danny's family, divorce, both sides, everywhere. And we just said we would never mention divorce. 31 years later, we've never mentioned it. When we get really, really mad, we'll talk about counseling. But never divorce. And I just think that's really important. I mean, it's a covenant. This is not something that can be broken. Whenever things are hard, you don't leave. You stay and you fight for what's important. So we just made a vow we wouldn't ever mention it. So.
Yeah. And not to say that, where abuse is there, or there's some things, but the important thing is we made a commitment to God first, and then to one another, and then we've
both honored that covenant,
and we've honored that, and when we've had problems, we've taken it to God. Instead of accusing the other person. Now, not that we haven't done that initially in arguments, but ultimately when we get alone, we take it to God, resolve it with God, and then come back together and then reconcile with one another. But it's ultimately always taking it to God. I wanted to, just in closing, wanted to mention, after we got engaged, but before we got married,
and after we moved the date,
and that's true. Yeah, after we moved the date, this was we found out that Laura was pregnant with what would be our first child, Noelle.
About 3 weeks before the wedding, we found out.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that I remember. It was one of the these some things like vivid memories, and I remember her sharing, and she was so upset and so distraught, not because of the blessing of the baby, but just like,
well, we weren't going to have kids for
right.
5 to 7 years. We were going to be rich, and we were going to travel, and that was our plan.
That was our plan. But God,
Danny was in school.
Yes, but God knew better.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that could have had a incredibly negative impact on our relationship, and even being concerned what other people would think. We tried to kind of cover it up in some different ways, but God even, Noelle was born sooner than she was supposed to.
Yeah, we were going to say she was 3 weeks early, but she was 3 weeks early.
So there was no covering it up.
6 week early baby at 8 pounds, that doesn't really compute.
Obvious that that's not the case. So,
But God doesn't want us to hide things.
Yes.
He wants our story to be in the light.
Yes.
If you hide things, then Satan can condemn you in that. Mm-hmm. He can accuse you in the night. But if you confess, if you talk about things, not to like celebrate it, but to just be like, man, God loves me and he forgave me and this is what happened, then the more often that you do that, the more free that you get, the less the enemy can use that against you.
Yeah.
Because fear of what other people think, condemnation, all those things are not from God. Those are from the enemy. So get it in the light.
Absolutely. And it's it's the beginning. The beginning is important, but it's not the end. We can our stories are always ongoing, and different things can happen that seem like these terrible things that can could destroy us, but yet God can use those things to bring glory to himself. And again, looking back, there are things that we would definitely change about our story and what have you. But yet we see God moving in all of it, and now we can say, hey, it's not about us. It's ultimately about him. And as we seek him first, it says seek first the kingdom of God, and God will bless you with the things that you need. And so as we focus on him first, we've just seen him bless us and bless everything that we do. And ultimately, it's not about us.
Yeah.
It's not about me. The cool thing is that the God of the universe wants a relationship with me, and he created me for his pleasure and to have a relationship with me. Yeah. But it's not about me. It's about him. Jesus is the one. It's his story, that's the most important. And it's so amazing that we get to partner with him,
Yeah. And a neat thing about us sharing this with you, so God brought Danny to me to show me that I could be loved. I still didn't think I was lovable. But he loved me anyway. So that showed me part of God's character. Mm-hmm. Then he gave us a baby. I think that even if we had stayed pure till we got married, I still think we would have had a baby 9 months after. We were on birth control with our first 2 kids. Mm-hmm. So we tried to, anyway. So then he gave us a baby to teach us about unconditional love. Mm-hmm. How that child loves you no matter how you act, no matter what you do. And also to teach us about sacrifice. Mm-hmm. So God knows what he's doing. God knows.
That's right. Thank you for joining us for this edition of our podcast. If you want to know more about our family and what God is doing in us, you can go to our website, OurBeautifulBrokenness.com. On our website, you can find other editions of our podcast, more about our story, and how to connect with us directly.